You got it.
Say that again. I am really pleased, Lianne, to welcome you to our face-to-face Zoom conversations for the library. So thank you so much for sharing with us tonight.
Well, thanks for having me. This is kind of an exciting thing to be talking instead of just doing. So Amy did mention the privacy bit, and this will come up a little bit as I talk, but this cooking has been a labor of love that started, I think I was looking at my notes, and the first time I filled the farm stand at the community school with food was March 27th, and we've been going strong since. And this started kind of obviously as a response to COVID, and I'll get into that backstory a little bit. But what I've really found doing this work is that it's become, for me, a lot less about COVID and a lot more about our community, and not just Tamworth, but Sandwich, Moulton Borough, Ossipee. I think folks from surrounding towns use these meals too. And it's been kind of interesting. I've had lots of conversations with people who either send me messages or call, or people I bump into in the farm stand. And what I found is that food is a way that we take care of ourselves, obviously physically, because we need it to live. But really, food is something we use to take care of ourselves emotionally. And what better time than COVID do we need to take care of ourselves emotionally? It's turned out that there is a lot of food insecurity in Carroll County. And I've done some research as part of this work of preparing meals. And Tamworth's numbers are astonishingly high, double any other town in Carroll County for people 65 and older who self-identify as not getting enough food on a regular basis. It was 14% of our population polled. There's elder, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting what it is, but it's a state program on aging and elder care. And they've done this exhaustive study of the counties in the state. And so I just mined the data for Carroll County. So 14.75% of elders in Tamworth identifies not getting enough food regularly. And the next highest town, I think, was Madison at 7.8%. So these meals that I started preparing in March, after the community school sent everybody to learn at home on March 13th, started because I wanted to do something, feeling kind of impotent in the face of what was then astonishingly scary and now is just kind of numbingly scary. And what I know how to do is cook. And we had freezers full of food, meat and vegetables that we had put up for years, maybe not years, but for a time. And I started putting that to work thinking, well, people are scared to go to the grocery store, or people have just lost their jobs. So what if we put food out and see if people will pay a little something for it, or not, or maybe pay a lot for it? And what we found was that that system works actually almost all the time to be self-sustaining. There are some people who write lovely little notes and send me cards and say, I'm sorry, I couldn't pay anything. And then there are people who take, 4 meals and leave $100. The $100 doesn't happen as often as the notes, but it does balance out. So what happened in March was that I started cooking. The community school is in transition right now. We are not running as a day school this year or in the future, and we're transitioning to something called the semester school, and we're focusing on social justice and climate resilience, and will be a boarding program. So kids from anywhere, it could be kids from Kennett, but it could be kids from Colorado or Sri Lanka or wherever, who want to come for 4 months and study intensively, learning how to do projects in their own communities through doing them in the Tamworth community, will come to us. But that planning didn't need to be done in March, and I wasn't needing to do it in April, and I wasn't needing to do it in May. So I had a lot of time to cook. And at first I was filling the farm stand. We outfitted it with 2 freezers, and I was filling a freezer a day for, 5 to 6 days a week, which totaled, 4 to 550 meals a week. And early on, when people really weren't going to the grocery store, the freezer was emptying out every day and a half. Then the summer came, and with it came that kind of surge of pandemic refugees, people maybe who had summer homes or who were renting homes here to be away from urban areas to try to be safer, and summer people who came in their usual seasonal flow. And a lot of those folks had financial means, I'm assuming, based on the donation profiles, but still wanted to find some way that they could help our community members who were perhaps suffering because of COVID. And so people would say, is it all right if I take something, even if I can afford to get food somewhere else? And of course, the answer is yes, because that's what sustains the program, that people who can pay do take some of the meals so that people who can't pay can still take some of the meals. That, I think by the end of September, I had made 7,000 meals. And then my school year started and I had to shift gears to the system that I'm in now, which is cooking 1 to 3 days a week around the rest of the work that I have to do. And the pace hasn't slackened as far as, people emptying the freezers. We cooked a Thanksgiving meal, a Christmas meal. Now we're doing this Chinese New Year meal, and those are also available by donation. So some people don't pay anything or pay a very little bit, and some people pay a lot, and it all covers itself. And one thing that's been really astonishing to me is how few people, I get a lot of feedback saying, oh, how do you trust people? How do you trust people to not just take something? I said, well, if they need to take it, they should take it. I'm not worrying about people needing to take it or not. Like stealing is the perception, and that's not really part of the paradigm. So what I found though is that I don't think that there's really anybody not paying something. I had a man come to me and he was looking around kind of confused, and I was shearing sheep and walked over to him, and he was looking for the food. His grown son and daughter-in-law had just lost their jobs. This was in May. We were late with our shearing this year. And they and their 3 kids had just moved in with this retired man. And he needed some extra food, and he heard that this was possible. And he, his car had seen better days, and he had kind of like a little clutch of bills in his hand. I said, listen, that's a lot for you to take on. You don't have to, you're feeding all these people. You don't have to pay anything. It's okay. He goes, of course I'm going to pay my way. I'm going to pay what I can pay. And I said, great, you pay what you can pay. But people want to support their community, and they want to do their part, whatever that is. And that's been one of the big lessons to me, that even people who by some standards don't have much of anything. Oops, sorry, I'm getting banged out by my automatic.
You're all good with us, Lianne.
Can you still see me? Okay, good. I've lost you.
Yeah.
Even people who by some standards don't have anything still want to contribute what they perceive as their fair share. And I think that that's sort of a moral lesson that would be great for all of us in society to learn, that like grifting is not really such a big thing, I think the other thing that I've learned from doing this cooking is that this has been a huge amount of work, and it's physically exhausting sometimes, when you're like cooking for 9 hours a day, standing up on a plywood floor by yourself. I was by myself for most of this time, but I also found that this was as close as I can come to meditation. Like I've got such a squirrel brain that never shuts off. This like allowed me to ponder so many things, so many personal things, so many things about the community, about my family, about the world. And so in the midst of all the turmoil of the pandemic and all the political unrest and all just the heartbreaking protesting and the respondent violence that we saw this summer, I was able to just kind of like process for hours at a time while doing something purposeful. And so when people say to me, oh, this is such a huge amount of work you've done, I don't know how I would have gotten through the past 10 months without this work, you know, like I really would have lost my mind. So I really want to say thank you to anyone who's ever taken a meal, because it's been, you know, free therapy for me every single day. People ask me for recipes all the time. I almost never use recipes. So I'm very disappointing when it comes to telling you how to recreate something I've made. My grandmother was the kind of cook that just kind of made things up as she went along. And I used to watch her, the Dios, Marjorie Dio, and I can't remember what her husband's name was. Peggy, you might know. Or David Little might know. Oh, you're all on mute. Oh, okay, sorry. Well, my grandmother used to cook for them in the summers, and they would say, oh, just do something with whatever, lobster this week. And she would just make up these recipes. And because they were paying for it, she got to be really extravagant. And I would just watch her and say, well, what are you making? She goes, oh, I don't know. I'll make up a name for it when I'm done. And I feel like that was my biggest lesson in cooking. That, and that she always used salt, like with her hand, like by the fistful. So I inherited her. She had like a beautiful little Spanish tureen that was always on the back of the stove, and I inherited that, and it only has kosher salt in it that we grab handfuls of. But the connection to food and to my grandmother, and now to our community through food, it's something that if you're not kind of connected to food, some people actually don't like to eat, which is astonishing. My mother was a person who really could care less. You could give her an old rye husk of bread, or you could give her a steak and she'd eat it, both of them kind of equally passively. But if you enjoy putting things in your mouth and experiencing whatever memory comes about or whatever physical response comes about, then just imagine getting to the privilege of taking a bunch of ingredients and putting those together and tasting them as you go, and knowing that you're putting it out into the world for people to not just sustain themselves with, but to like feed their souls. I think that Amy was asking about a title for this, and I'm forgetting that I had brought the soul into it, that food is probably the most soulful thing that I know. And Amy, I forgot to start my timer, so I'm not paying attention as I'm going on. Maybe people could just nod because you can't talk. Do you want me to be more linear about the meals, or I'm not really sure what people are expecting from this other than.
We could, if you want, Lianne, we can start opening it for people to ask you questions.
Yeah, let's do that.
There's anyone who wants to unmute themselves and ask, or type it in the chat box.
I'll talk. This is Maureen Diamond, and I'd like to say something very, very briefly. This is a wonderful presentation, Lianne. Thank you very much. I meant to get this out on the exchange before tonight's meeting, but I got overwhelmed with a quilting project that I'm not doing so well at. But Lianne was nominated by several people for an award from the UNH Cooperative Extension, Granite State Food Heroes, people who have risen to the challenge of that COVID has presented. TCNA nominated Lianne for this award, and I meant to do a screenshot of the announcement about it, and I will do that and put it on the exchange, but I'm sorry that I didn't do it before this evening's meeting. It's just absolutely a wonderful thing that you're doing, and the acknowledgement of the food insecurity in our community is pretty profound. And to be able to really have an impact on that is something that I love your description of the meditation that you do while you're preparing meals. So thank you very, very much.
Well, thanks. And thanks to the work that you all are doing too with just trying to figure out how to make food more accessible. It's important stuff.
Peggy, I think wants to say something.
Yeah.
Partly because I have to leave way too soon, Lianne. You know, I'm a church musician, so I've heard many a sermon. This was a beautiful sermon and inspiration. And clearly you're a good thinker, better than I am. But I just want to say that the example of doing what you truly feel, sense and feel you can do is a powerful sermon. And here that's all. Thank you. It's wonderful. Thank you for getting this going.
Thanks. Yeah.
Lianne, somebody asks in the chat, is there anything otherwise that we can do to support what you're doing as a community?
Yeah. Well, I didn't mention this, but I should say that I think in response to, this is completely me editorializing out of the blue. People have not necessarily said this, but I'm assuming that this wave has come in. We have gotten really quite generous donations this year, earmarked, we meaning the community school, earmarked for this food program. So I think that there are a lot of people in our community who are feeling hemmed in and a little hopeless, maybe a little helpless under the weight of the world right now. And they're seeing this work to feed people. And they're sending in, you know, sometimes I get a $5 check or a $5 bill with a sticky note dropped in the donation box. Sometimes, you know, we get a $1,000 check. So people are recognizing that, and that helps balance out the potential shortfalls from people who really need the food and maybe can't pay much of anything. The other thing that we're doing that has also been working really well, and this was an idea that I read about in the New York Times this spring. In the city, on street corners, literally on sidewalks, were cropping up these refrigerators that just community members would set up, and they would like ask some business if they could run an extension cord in. And then people would just, in the neighborhood, would just fill the refrigerator, and people who needed it could take the food. I said, well, how simple is that, you know? So we've got a refrigerator in the farm stand and some shelves, and people pretty regularly just drop off food. You know, it could be a tube of toothpaste, it could be a box of Triscuits, it could be a can of chowder, or it could be whatever it is, a bag of potatoes. Toilet paper was a hot commodity for a little while. And that kind of share shelf, I think that that's another way that people have been feeling really like they're doing something very tangible. So they're at the grocery store, they buy 2 of this instead of 1, and then they drop something off. And it all gets taken, which is really nice, and it gets taken quickly. So I get the sense that there are people who come, and I honestly, because I live in the community, I know so many people, I try not to watch a whole lot of like who's taking what, because I don't need to know that. But I do pay attention to the flow of things in and out, and that shelf gets a lot of use. So I would say if people were interested, that's a really easy way to make a difference in somebody's life, to supplement their food or household budget by giving them food or household items. pet food. That was another thing, kind of goes quickly. I wish I get lots of people saying, "Oh, I've got so much extra time, I could come in and help you cook." And I feel that's such a tricky one with COVID. And it's also honestly a tricky one just because of the way I work. I'm trying to work so quickly to make so much. And I've worked a lot in kitchens with other people at different times. And I've worked with kids, like, you know, the community school kids have done so much cooking with me. That because time is of an essence, it's really hard to bring other people in. So I'm sorry that that's not something I can do right now. I'm really actually looking forward to the time when we can all be together again, because I'd love to do some cooking classes, but that's not quite yet.
Is there anyone else who has something to share?
Well, I just want to say I appreciate what you do, and it's interesting that your cooking is a form of meditation, and that when I take another meal, that will color the experience a little bit. And the big meals that you cook, like for Thanksgiving, the big ones you've done, you know, remind me pleasantly of everybody being together at the school. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, you're welcome. I think that was, I can't see, but was that, maybe that was Ed?
Yeah.
Yeah, those Thanksgiving meals, boy, I missed that this year. I really, you know, we all have our Thanksgiving traditions, but one of my Thanksgiving traditions is having Thanksgiving meal for the community at the community school. So I get, you know, not just my family group, but this huge group, and we didn't get to have that this year. So it did feel good seeing all those people pick up meals. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Lianne. It's a wonderful service and so valuable for the whole community, says Heidi.
Oh.
Heidi Rowe.
Oh, Heidi. Oh, well, so let me just, not to put her on the spot, even though you can't see her, but so that is another way that some people, baking is not my thing. And part of it is because it's, you know, there's so much chemistry involved in measuring. So yeah, there's no throwing handfuls of much when you're baking. But this wonderful group of people in Tamworth and Sandwich approached me about making baked goods to keep in the freezer, so that when people came to take a meal, they could take a little bag of cookies or a little something or other. And they worked out their own schedule. I talked to them, so like I felt confident about the sanitation aspect of it, the safety aspect of it. And it was great, because I think that going back to that kind of like nurturing that food does, we do have a soft spot for sweets, right? It's, you know, it's hardwired into us when we come out as babies, that sweet milk. And then it's like the last taste you have when you're at the other end of life is sweetness. So there's something good about sweet. And this group of people, and I'm fairly certain it was all women, they didn't just make, you know, a box of brownies. They made these like spectacular, interesting little treats every week. And boy, I do admit to a couple of times this summer when I'd be stocking the freezer saying, well, I just think I'm going to have one of those. And I would take this, you know, they're frozen too, so it was perfect in August, eating these things. And oh, that was a labor of love that they kept up right through until Christmas. So thanks to Heidi for being part of that.
Rash. Is that at your house, Lianne, that noise?
That's Liebling, my horse of a dog. She's Great Dane, Great Pyrenees, and she's, you know, eating her food. It's supposed to be on a stool so she doesn't choke. She doesn't care. She knocks it everywhere.
Polly Mahoney asks, she was a little late to get in, and I think you actually answered her question, but one of the, I think she was speaking about food insecurity, or asking about food insecurity in this area. And you did speak about that at the beginning, and there are some pretty great numbers.
Yeah, and you know, I haven't looked at the, I'd be interested to see the family numbers too with kids, and that's probably easy data for me to find and something I will track down. But Polly, the number I quoted came from a study on aging in New Hampshire done by a state agency. And in Carroll County, Tamworth, so this was people 65 and older who took this survey. So it's all self-identified. And in Tamworth, it was 14.75, I think, % of people 65 and older identified as not having enough food at any given time. And the next highest number, what did I say, 7.8%, 8.7%? A lot less was in Madison. And then it went all the way down to something crazy like, I think Albany was pretty high, but Freedom maybe was 0.02, or Sandwich was 0.02. Sandwich had a ridiculously low number, but Tamworth was startlingly high. So that's the only data I have about food insecurity, other than knowing basic economic data about Carroll County, which has us, regularly as the second and third poorest county overall in the state.
And one of the things I might say, this is Maureen Diamond again, that you all know Joanne Rainville, the executive director of TCNA. And early on last March, she realized that we needed to monitor these issues in the area. And so she kind of convened a working group around food insecurity. And I know you were on at least the first call for that, Lianne.
Yes, yeah.
And those of us who are not as busy in the kitchen as you kind of continue to meet and kind of keep our finger on the pulse of what might be happening and where the weak spots might be in Carroll County and in Tamworth in particular. You're right that we have particularly high incidence of food insecurity in our area. I think one of the interesting things to me lately, you might have all read the post on the Exchange a few days ago where Joanne shared with us all that Ossipee Concerned Citizens had to close for 2 weeks because of an individual who tested positive for the coronavirus. And immediately, of course, Joanne is out trying to take care of her friends in Tamworth and getting Rosie's restaurant to agree to prepare meals for those recipients. And as this work group that Joanne set up discussed this 2 nights ago, Marianne Jackson from the Gibson Center said they can help to fill in the gaps. It's just, it really does take a village. And we have a good village here in Tamworth where people are certainly looking out for one another and for the communities around us.
How many meals does that involve? Do you know, Maureen? In Tamworth?
I don't for sure in Tamworth. I heard someone mention the numbers for Wakefield, which was part of this discussion, and that's 43 people per day. In Tamworth, I'm not sure. I know I've heard Joanne tell me, but I don't want to say a number and be not sure.
Potentially around 40 or 43 in Tamworth also.
And what Joanne said was she has some funding from Tamworth Foundation to help her reimburse Rosie's for the expense of taking care of our citizens while the Ossipee Center is not able to provide the meals.
Well, Maureen, just have Joanne call me if she finds that she's got a gap, because 40 is not such a big number for me to do something to fill in if you need it.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Not too many of us could say that, right?
Well,
40, I can do that, no problem. Lianne, thank you so much for your time. I know we're all. Go ahead.
I've got one quick question, if I may. Lianne, it's Bob.
Hey, Bob.
Hi. I was just wondering, this effort that you've got going here,
Mhm.
the need's not going to disappear anytime soon. And I'm
Yeah.
just wondering how you picture yourself with it in a year or two or more down the road as other things start to happen at the school and other
Yeah.
things start to tug at you.
Mhm.
How do you picture yourself with this down the road?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's something I've been giving a lot of thought to. So the answer is not a clean one sentence answer, but so part of the school's reinvention includes building on site some housing for retirees so that we have on our campus, so to speak, a multi-age community. And so the people who would come and live at the community school, it would be, I don't know what the agreement would be, a lease agreement, probably not buying. But people who would come live there, older people who would come live there, would do so because they're committing to taking classes with the kids, teaching classes, eating meals, X number of meals a week with the student community. There's something really potent that happens when you get teens together with older adults. And we want to make that an integral part of what we're doing going forward. So because the new program will be a boarding program where we'll be providing, 3 meals a day, 7 days a week for the students and the staff and for the people, the older people living on our campus. And so the long-term vision is that we build into that part of the program the ability to either have people from the community come in and join us for meals, like actually come in and sit down and eat a meal, or we maintain a certain level of this kind of takeout model where people can come without having to interact if they don't want to. But the cooking won't necessarily be done by me at that point. So the vision right now is that we can keep going with this for the next year or so, as is, with the model as is. Hopefully, other things will crop up as, Maureen's group and others start paying more attention to food insecurity in Carroll County. But we're prepared to keep going for a while as is, and then hopefully transition into our new model while continuing to be aware that feeding people is just something we do from now on.
Boy, that'll be fun to watch. It's so great.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks. It's fun to do. Yeah. It's pretty interesting, being part of reinventing the community school. The school's been called the community school since its inception, and there have been efforts throughout the school's history of, trying to, like, doing community service. The kids have to do 150 hours of community service to graduate. And sometimes we've done that in organized ways. Sometimes kids have done that on their own. But I have struggled at different times during the school's life to feel that we were really part of the community. And part of that came to me because so many people in town who I know well, I'd say, oh yeah, I work at the community school. And they'd be like, oh, is that still running? Where is that again? So that just showed me that we had work to do to become a part of the community. And so this kind of reinvention is keeping that in mind, that we want to be of this place, even if all of our students aren't necessarily from here. The work that we do, the curriculum that we're building now, is really focusing on solving our very micro-regional problems around social justice and climate change. And we're teaching the kids using those projects so that they can devise their own projects to take back to their own communities. So going forward, you know, and this food is just another part of that, we're really envisioning the community school as being something that hopefully no one will ever say to me again, oh, where is that place? You know, when I'm at town meeting.
Leanne Louise Taylor writes in, thanks for all you've been doing. Great gratitude and appreciation.
Louise, hug on your neck. That's something my mom used to always say to Louise and Nancy.
And John Gotchen writes, or Barb, that just looking at the numbers of free and reduced lunch, the percentage, how that's gone up at the Brett School every year. So you're definitely filling a need.
Yeah.
And as Bob asked, it's not a need that's going to go away.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great, that's a good statistic to look at. Thanks, John. I'm just making a note about that. Thank you for not asking me for recipes, all of you. I appreciate that. Though Sue Hogue did ask me for some recipe a little while ago. I don't know if you know her. She lives in Sandwich, and so I said, well, I'll just kind of make up what I made up. And so I kind of gave her the gist of it, and she shared her secret family recipe. I don't think it's really a secret family recipe, but one thing her family loves to do is save salad at the end of the meal. You know, when it's already got the dressing on it, and so many of us put that out for the chickens or in the compost, they save it, and in the morning they fry it, they heat it up so it's really wilted, and then they crack eggs into it and scramble it all together. And I said, that's brilliant. I think that sounds delicious. So that's how recipes really work.
Right.
Just make it up.
Really had me going, Leanne, last week when you did the baked rice recipe from the New York Times. So I was like, okay, I'm going to Google New York Times and see which baked rice recipe she did. And damned if it was just like, oh my gosh, you know, there was one with leeks, like you had leeks and celery and rice, but it was totally different.
Sorry.
Finally ended up doing what you did. I just thought, well, okay, I'm just going to wing it. I'm just going to do what Leanne did, and which I'm good at doing anyway. So that was great. But you were the inspiration for
good.
me trying baked rice, which was wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know why that recipe caught my eye so like intensely, but it did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Comfort food.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Those little crispy bits in the bottom, delicious.
Well, we'll let you go. If anyone else has anything to add, otherwise we can let Leanne go to put her feet up for the night.
Yeah, I've got to go make some dinner. Well, thank you all. I appreciate seeing these friendly faces that I don't get to see very often.
Yeah.